It's great to be with you and to sit with you, even across the distance of continents. Since I'm here in San Diego, and the various Zoom boxes I see on my computer paint pixelated pictures of beings in New York City, in Pennsylvania, in New Paltz, and elsewhere. My name is Seiryū, and I am a senior student at the Village Zendo. I've practiced a number of years with our Sangha, and at least looking through my little Zoom window into the world of the Village Zendo in New York City and Tribeca, I see lots of faces that are new, or at least are new to me, since I'm not there very often. I just want to say a word of welcome to you all, and hope to maybe see you at the summer retreat to practice in person together. Many of you know that I'm a writer and a professor of creative writing, and I want to talk today about some of the issues that often come up in my courses that I think are instructive to us as Zen students. In fact, the roots of this talk are from a presentation that I gave at a writing conference earlier in the spring. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to engage in a very short little exercise. And so I'd like to invite you, if you're comfortable, to close your eyes. And for 1 minute, I'd like you to mentally tell yourself the story of your last period of zazen. And at the end of that minute, I'll ring a bell and then we'll keep going. What was the train of thoughts, one after another, through your mind? What was the cascade of physical experiences you felt? How did one shade of emotion metamorphose into another, and then another, and then another? Let's take a minute to try and tell ourselves the story of our last period of zazen. Thanks for doing that with me. So right now I'm teaching an Introduction to Creative Nonfiction course, and we're about to embark on a unit devoted to memoirs. It's a room full of 18 to 21-year-olds, so we're often focusing on crafting narratives of childhood. And inevitably, someone will ask with deep concern, but how do I accurately recreate dialogue from 5 or 10 or 15 years ago? They have a deep and sincere desire to get it right. Get it right. This is, after all, nonfiction, right? A genre of writing dedicated to the real. I just asked you to tell yourself a story that began some 40-ish minutes ago and lasted half an hour, that last period of zazen. How did that go? Did you get it right? When I began practice a long time ago, I very much wanted to get it right. and often still do. But back then, I counted my breath with diligence. 1, 2, 3. Feeling this sort of gathering sense of mastery as I started to reach 7, 8, 9. But then I would think, I thought I am mastering this. I was thinking instead of counting. Oh no. 1, 2, 3. I can't believe I thought I was doing it right. Oh no! Now I'm thinking about not doing it right or doing it right. Foiled again. 1, 2, 3. Meditation became this grueling exercise of trying to just be the numbers with the breath and trying to be ruthless about not letting thoughts enter the stream of those numbers. I remember how much in those days I really appreciated what I felt was the ruthlessness of Zen that left no quarter but demanded 100% concentration. It gave me something to aspire to. I remember asking Enkyo Roshi at my first session, how was I supposed to go to sleep while counting my breath? That's how committed I was to mastering those numbers. So it's so startling when beginning Zen practice, at least it was for me, with counting the breath, to see just how crowded our minds are with language. Just how circus-like the acrobatic flights of narrative are that swoop over and under and in between each of those numbers. When I was a little kid, I remember playing a game of tracing back my thoughts as far as I could, like jumping from stepping stone to stepping stone across a stream until the stones faded away and all I was left with was that stream. And here I was again with those elusive numbers. How to breathe from number to number without the words and the thoughts and the feelings knocking me off my game, sweeping me away. Zen is famously a tradition outside of words and letters. And there are many stories of practitioners abandoning words altogether. One of those is the story of Xiangyan Zhiqian, who famously, in a moment of deep crisis when he couldn't answer the question of his teacher, collected all his sutra books and study texts and burned them all, declaring them useless with the phrase, "A painted rice cake does not satisfy hunger." You might think of this phrase as akin to the famous Magritte painting, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe." This is not a pipe. A painted rice cake does not satisfy hunger. Later, living as a hermit, one day he was sweeping when his broom lifted up a small pebble that struck a bamboo. Bah! In that instant, he was enlightened. Hearing stories like this, it's tempting to see words and language as the enemy, to be burned up and swept away, leaving some sort of crystalline, pure, real space of being. 1, 2, 3. But where does that leave a writer like me? How to get it right when, 1, getting it right in the field of nonfiction means telling the truth, and 2, getting it right might never be possible in language at all. A few years ago, I published a memoir called Matter, a memoir in weeds. In it, I wrote about being raised by my single immigrant mom with absolutely no contact or even knowledge about my father because she refused to speak of him. And here I just want to say for a moment how much I really appreciated Seiryū's talk of last week about his own relationship with his father. Our stories are different, but also so very, very similar. The only thing I knew growing up, the only thing that was painfully clear was that I could never ask about him. So when it came to writing a memoir, as I tried to capture that radical absence, I was so hungry for something real and true to hold on to. I wanted, like my students in my Introduction to Creative Nonfiction course, I too wanted to get it right. And in the silence of that writing, all sorts of fantasies and half-recalled things heard in childhood from around corners or behind closed doors came flooding into my mind. I wanted reality, a rice cake, you could say, to fill my mouth and pour out in words onto the page. Instead, all of these painted scenes unfurled. I imagined my mother as a teenager at a village square dance in her small town in Uruguay. I imagined her falling in love with a Jewish man and having to flee the country because of her father's anti-Semitic Nazi sympathies. They were all fantasies, suppositions, best guesses. Given that the factual archive, my mother, was closed and would not open, that's all I had. These swirling thoughts, like circus acrobats, swinging in the tent of my mind. I despaired at ever getting this memoir right with so little verifiably factual substance to work with. And even if I did find my way towards writing satisfactory nonfiction, that is, a true story, how could a painted rice cake ever satisfy my deepest hunger, the hunger to be real? Dogen took up Xiangyan's famous saying, a painted rice cake does not satisfy hunger, in his fascicle Gabyo, or painted rice cake. He has a very different approach than Xiangyan's. In discussing this problem of painted rice cakes, Dogen wrote, when mountains and waters are painted, blue, green, and red paints are used. Okay, that makes sense. But then he goes on to list more painting materials. Strange rocks and wondrous stones are used. The 4 jewels and the 7 treasures are used. Suddenly we're painting mountains with rocks and stones, jewels and treasures. What is a mountain but rocks and stones piled one atop another? Where does one find jewels and treasures like diamonds or gold, but deep in mountains? We might say that's just physical reality, but here Dogen is telling us that these are all paints used in painting. What is he saying then about the real world? Dogen doesn't say that painted mountains are painted with blue, green, and red paints, and real mountains are painted with strange rocks and wondrous stones. There's just one list of ingredients. When mountains and waters are painted, blue, green, and red paints are used, strange rocks and wondrous stones are used, the 4 jewels and the 7 treasures are used. When we sit down on the cushion, what are we painting with? And when we're walking down the street, visiting a sick friend or relative, marching in the street, writing our elected officials, just sitting and watching the birds play in the yard with a cup of coffee in our hands, giving a Dharma talk, listening to a Dharma talk. What are we painting with? In my Introduction to Creative Nonfiction course, we move through 3 units. First, we read and write with a focus on observing the external world and recording what we encounter. Then we turn inward with a focus on observing the movement of the mind, trying to capture something of that circus of thoughts. Finally, we come to memoir, where we merge external and internal through the act of remembering. I often turn in my class to this quote from the poet Alfred Korn that is quoted by another poet and memoirist, Mark Doty, in a discussion of how he came to write his memoir, Firebird. So Alfred Korn wrote, "The idea hard to get in focus is not how things looked, but how they felt, then and then now." The idea hard to get in focus is not how things looked, but how they felt, then and then now. Memoirs especially, but all forms of creative nonfiction, are not just about the external, verifiable details, but also, and even more so, about our internal lives. And who can verify any of that? What would verification even mean? Realizing that the truth of memoir includes everything, even fantasy, even misperceptions, even wandering thoughts. Dogen in Gabyo wrote, "As a Buddha has been painted on a single scroll in this way, all Buddhas are painted Buddhas, and all painted Buddhas are actual Buddhas." All painted Buddhas are actual Buddhas. For me, that points to the breakthrough I had in the writing of my memoir. All of it is real. Did my mother go to dances in the town square as a teenager? I have no idea. She won't tell me. Did my mother flee with her forbidden love from one continent to another? That I can actually answer no. Actually, she met said forbidden love. Both of them fled Uruguay and met each other here in the United States. But actually, that story turns out to be way, way more complicated and way more interesting. But that's for the next memoir coming down the pike. So you'll have to wait to eat that painted rice cake, which I can assure you is delicious indeed. But the point is that those fantasies, I fantasized those fantasies. My mind filled those blank spots in the narrative. And my mind, my life, isn't that what a memoir is meant to capture? 1, 2, 3. In the beginning, I thought the point was to burn away the thoughts, to leave just those numbers, to be ruthless. It's taken me a long time to feel the rightness of the acrobatic thoughts dancing with the numbers, to rest in the infinitely finely woven net that is the foundation of the circus tent, that lets nothing fall away. That is altogether another kind of ruthlessness, one of kindness and generosity, one that catches everything. Getting it right means leaving nothing out. There's a koan, Mumonkan Case 19, Ordinary Mind is the Way, that seems to me to point to this realization that nothing gets left out. Joshu once asked Nansen What is the way? Nansen answered, ordinary mind is the way. Then should we direct ourselves toward it or not? Asked Joshu. If you try to direct yourself toward it, you go away from it, answered Nansen. Joshu continued, if we do not try, how can we know that it is the way? Nansen replied, the way does not belong to knowing or to not knowing. Knowing is illusion. Not knowing is blankness. If you really attain to the way of no doubt, it is like a great void, so vast and boundless. How then can there be right and wrong in the way? At these words, Joshu was suddenly enlightened. What is the way? Joshu asks. What is Zen? What is the truth? What is real? Who am I? Nansen answers, ordinary mind is the way. His answer couldn't be more barefaced. Just this. But Joshu, like most of us, I think, feels like there's got to be more. Then should we direct ourselves toward it or not? We feel a hunger that comes from someplace that feels things should be different. To take my life story and my memoir project as an example, I felt like in order to adequately tell the story of my life, I needed the facts that had been kept from me. Or to take the practice of counting the breath again. It's a skillful means on the part of our teachers that when we first show up to practice, we're given something to, quote, direct ourselves towards. The numbers can serve as a convenient prop until we see. Until we see what? Nansen responds to Joshu's question by saying, if you direct yourself toward it, you go away from it. What is closer than even the facts of my life? I thought my fantasies and misperceptions and guesses missed the mark. But what is closer than even the numbers and my breath? I thought the thoughts that swung through the numbers were failings. But their conversation continues, and Nansen adds, sorry, I lost my place in my notes. Nansen responds to Joshu's question, and their conversation continues. Forgive me. Their conversation continues, and Nansen adds, the way does not belong to knowing or not knowing. It is like the great void, so vast and boundless. What freedom and joy when ordinary mind is the way. Even the ordinary mind that loses its place among notes and stutters and stumbles for a moment. What freedom and joy. So what happens when we paint or write ourselves freely, ordinarily on the single scroll of our lives? I'm currently working on a collection of essays about apocalypse, ecology, and the optimism of making practices like weaving and foraging. In one essay, in which I bequeathed to the reader all of my favorite secret foraging spots that I had when I lived in Ohio upon my move to California, I write, between me and you, can anything be given? I spent 11 years seeing with my own eyes and tasting with my own tongue. I can tell you where and when and how, but when your eyes see and your tongue tastes, what then? When you become I, what then? I suppose what I want to give you is the look, the looking, the wish to look. Look at my looking. then look for yourself. Each of us is painting rice cakes, whether with words or with paints or with spreadsheets or with brooms or mops or with a blood pressure cuff or with a microscope or at a desk or at a cash register or behind a camera. And in so doing, we feed each other. I paint the rice cake and you eat it. You paint the rice cake and I eat it. We are all each to one another like fingers pointing to the moon. Look, look. And best of all, as fingers pointing, we actually don't have to direct ourselves in any particular direction. We point best when we are simply ordinary, simply ourselves.